The day is in the midst of a year-long look at affordable housing in the region. What specifically do you think the legislature should do to help people who can't afford to buy a home or are struggling to rent an apartment?
Thank you, Kim, and thank you to the day for hosting this opportunity for us to share our views and perspectives as far as this race goes. So to answer your question, I'm very passionate about affordable housing issues, have been since I was first elected to public office when I was 20 years old to the state legislature representing the 41st District. And now in my 5th year on the town council, we are about knee-deep right now in having very comprehensive discussions, not just about affordable housing at large, but also specifically as it relates to a neighborhood in Groton by the name of Branford Manor, a 440 unit apartment complex that utilizes Section 8 housing vouchers. The bulk of the residents are women, in most cases single mothers, minority women, Black or Latino women, and in many cases can only speak Spanish, and they have experienced no shortage of terrible experiences and while living there, dealing with mold, for example, dealing with notices to quit after many residents felt were experiencing retaliation on the part of management for speaking out regarding those conditions. So the legislature is equipped to codify and pass legislation that can improve the living conditions, not just for folks living in Branford Manor, but in Section 8 housing across Connecticut. And so one thing I've done on the town council, I've called for ending the tax stabilization agreement that's provided to related companies, owner of Branford Manor. Currently, they are the city and the town of Groton abate just over $500,000 in taxes, and I would like our town to hold related in default of this tax stabilization agreement because they have not met their end of the bargain as far as that agreement goes. The living conditions, again, are absolutely deplorable. It is taking it's taken too much time for related to remediate not just those mold issues, but other health and safety hazards within the homes. No shortage of residents have submitted health complaints to Legislate. Legislate has investigated several of those complaints and have found that they are not in compliance with their health codes. And so this is a very serious matter. As far as what the state legislature can do, this past legislative session, the legislature passed and codified passed a statute that legally recognizes tenants' unions. In Branford Manor, the residents have established a tenants' union. They've organized, they've gone door to door, and their membership has grown significantly since they first started speaking out regarding their living conditions. One thing I would like to do on the town council, and before we do get elected, of course, is include or take a look at our Fair Rent Commission statutes and include language that truly actually codify the language that was set forth by the state legislature, codify language regarding the tenants' unions protections, legally recognizing tenants' unions as a body that can organize and advocate on their own behalf and that can bring forth complaints to the Fair Rent Commission, and most importantly, eliminate the exemption that is within our Fair Rent Commission that Section 8 housing cannot bring, or folks who live in Section 8 housing cannot bring forth their complaints to the Fair Rent Commission. Currently, no Branford Manor resident can bring forth their complaints because of the way our town ordinance is written. So I'd like to do that at the local level. As far as the state level goes, would like to take a look at how we deal with mold, for example. There are issues right now in terms of enforcement as far as, when the town or our health district receives mold complaints, who should be held liable and who should be held at fault, and how, in really questions about who and when we're placing the onus, when we are placing the onus on, related to remediate those issues, are they doing so in a satisfactory manner? So there are various examples that we can take a look at that have been, legislation that has been passed in other states regarding mold. So I'd like to work in a bipartisan manner, with our local delegation, but also folks who are passionate about housing issues to correct them. But again, affordable housing is absolutely critical. I think part of the issues we're having with Brantford is that housing, especially in the case of affordable housing, is highly concentrated in one neighborhood, and so we need to take a look at ensuring that we provide housing opportunities and housing that is affordable throughout our district and throughout Connecticut. And I've a great confidence that because of my ability to work across party lines, my ability to be a consensus builder, working closely with both town officials in Groton already, and looking forward to doing so in Stonington, that we can put together a comprehensive solution to tackle these critical housing issues, and not just southeastern Connecticut, but hopefully create an example that other communities in Connecticut can follow.
Okay, thank you. All right, next question. Connecticut recently enacted a law designed to provide safeguards against lawsuits for out-of-state patients seeking abortions in Connecticut and any provider who helps them. Do you support efforts to make Connecticut such a safe haven?
Yes, absolutely. And I give an incredible amount of credit and admiration to our our delegation for supporting that measure. Certainly my hopefully soon-to-be predecessor, Joe Delacruz, our current state representative for the 41st District. I'm very proud to have his support, and he voted to make that change last year in the legislative session. So it shouldn't be an issue. I, as a man, should not have a say on this matter. The woman's right to a woman's right to an abortion is her or their choice. It should not be mine. And the fact that we've enabled over the years an illegitimate Supreme Court to make critical decisions about a woman's body and their choice is absolutely deplorable and wrong. I will always vote to protect a woman's right to an abortion and protect her or their reproductive rights. As a state representative and as a town councilor, I've been very outspoken about women's health issues, and even as a Republican state representative while serving in from 2015 to 2017, I was endorsed by Planned Parenthood and NARAL because I've always been an outspoken voice for those issues. In this election, I am also endorsed by Planned Parenthood and Pro-Choice CT, as well as endorsed by the National Organization of Women here in for their Connecticut chapter. So as far as other women reproductive rights issues, I fundamentally believe that, especially our youngsters and our students in schools. I've spoken to many students who cannot afford their contraception, cannot afford their menstrual hygiene products, and the legislature over the last few years have taken a look at statutes regarding requiring municipalities or school districts to provide menstrual hygiene products in the classroom or within their facilities, and so I believe that is something we ought to do. I brought forth a ordinance that did just that just a few years ago on the town council. So this is something that I'm passionate about, I'd like to work on, but again, as far as the right to abortion, I will always protect that right for as long as I'm an elected official representing women and representing the 41st District up in Hartford.
Okay, thank you. All right, next question. The state's surplus has grown to over $4 billion. Do you support the decision to use some of that to lower the state's pension debt? Or do you think more should be returned to the taxpayer?
Absolutely. It ought to reduce our pension debt. We've done that over the last few years, in large part because of a bipartisan budget that was passed in 2017 by then Governor Dan Malloy and Democratic Governor Dan Malloy, as well as a balanced state legislature. And so as a result, we've about $3 billion in reserves have paid down pension debt to the tune of about $6 billion. The trains to the tune of about $6 billion of our pension debt, and we ought to do more. Again, this just goes to show what happens when Democrats and Republicans can come together when it deals with our state finances. Over the last few years, politics have become so polarized, and as a former member of the Finance Committee, Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, I'd like to roll up my sleeves and work across party lines to tackle some of our fiscal challenges coming for the, that we'll be facing for the years to come. Yes, targeted tax cuts need to be on the table, especially targeted tax cuts that provide relief to our working families and our middle-class families. So that includes taking a look at our sales tax, taking a look at property taxes, as has been done. There's a lot of questions: should we eliminate car taxes? As you know, in recent years, we've set a cap on car taxes, but it doesn't impact Groton or Stonington because of our current mill rate. This year as well, both communities, both Groton and Stonington, are facing revaluation, which has even though Groton, we as a town council voted to reduce the mill rate, the tax rates, the mill rates are now reduced. However, the actual assessments or appraisals for homes have increased, in some cases between 10 or 40%, whereas our commercial industrial tax base has really stayed the same, if not, in some cases saw a reduction. So in those cases, our commercial and industrial taxpayers are facing a significant tax cut this year, but our residential taxpayers, although reducing the mill rate, they're not feeling it as much, that relief. So we need to have comprehensive property tax reform relief. I'm committed to doing that, and I've done, spoke very loudly about that when I served in the state legislature. But we can do so much more, just in terms of tax cuts that the taxpayers have received over the last few years. Obviously, a reduction in motor vehicles. We're not taxing motor vehicles at all as far as the gasoline tax goes. However, there's a huge disparity between motor vehicles and diesel fuel tax. If you drive a diesel fueled vehicle or a truck, especially if you're a truck driver or transferring, driving goods or services, you are feeling the pinch quite a bit, especially if you're a small business owner. So I do think that needs to be looked at, especially if we're going to have a long-term holiday on our motor vehicle taxes as far as gasoline goes. So I do think it's so important to have a 41st District State Rep that has established relationships on the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, is ready to roll up their sleeves, work with our governor on solving our fiscal challenges. I have that experience. I've, on the town council, I've dealt with 5 budgets. So I've voted on and I have, read and worked on more budgets than both of my opponents combined. They have not worked on any local budget. They haven't been elected to any local office before. So despite being a young guy, I've amassed those experiences under my belt. It is, should we get elected to the 41st District, I'd like to serve on the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee to be not just well-equipped to advocate on behalf of our local taxpayers, but also be in a position to advocate for resources, bringing home those resources in terms of bonding, which is a key function of the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee. And so, that seat enabled us to, have a strong voice on, school renovations and reconstruction. So I'd like to continue that service, and again, will be a very outspoken voice on ensuring that we will course correct some of our fiscal challenges and continue to make great steps as far as addressing and providing solutions as we've done over the last few years.
All right, thank you. Okay, next question. How should Connecticut move forward to address climate change with regards to electric vehicles, wind power, and other clean energy strategies?
So, Kim, you've covered Groton for some time, and you understand how passionate I am about addressing climate change and solving some of the challenges we'll be facing from rising sea levels, warming temperatures, and so I'm very eager to roll up my sleeves and get to work up in the legislature on these key issues. As I've mentioned, not only would I like to serve on the Finance, Revenue, and Bonding Committee, should we be elected, but I'd also like to serve on the Environment Committee as well as the Energy and Technology Committee, which has oversight and cognizance over issues relating to climate justice or action, if you will. And so, in both Groton and Stonington, we'll be facing 20-inch sea level rise by 2050. And our coastlines are not at all prepared for those rising sea levels. I've spoken to Circa, for example, and several other groups within Groton that advocate for improving our environment, and they are so fearful of what could happen to our community should we face a catastrophic extreme weather event like we just recently saw down in Florida. So for starters, we need to make significant investments in our infrastructure, not just hardening our coastline, but rebuilding our coastline in a way that enables the wildlife to kind of operate in its natural way. Recently, Groton received a grant, in large part because of the work of our federal delegation, led by specifically Senator Blumenthal, to provide funding to build provide landscaping down by Esker Point. And by removing some of the hardscapes, removing some of the parking lot that is currently there, and to install various rain gardens and other features that will allow water to kind of penetrate that area in a more natural manner. And that will reduce flooding, that will reduce some of the issues our infrastructure and homes would be facing in the case of an extreme weather event within the Mumford Cove area. Supporting projects such as that, I think, are really critical, not just obviously within Mumford Cove, Groton Long Point, Noank area, but across our district in the city of Groton, in Mystic, and obviously in Stonington Borough, in the Stonington side of Mystic, Masons Island. These are areas that are low-lying that will, irrespective of extreme weather events, will be significantly impacted by rising sea levels throughout my lifetime. And so in addition to that, I'd like to work on issues relating to our transition to renewable energy. There's been a lot of conversation right now locally as far as what our transition will look like, especially as far as wind power goes, as far as solar goes. I think what's most critical is the siting of these facilities. For example, why is it that we have no shortage of rooftop space and parking lot space that could be outfitted and retrofitted in a way that could accommodate solar? And we just haven't done that aggressively, and I think we need to, as a state, work hand in hand with our communities to effectuate that kind of change. And as far as wind goes, the siting is so critical, and to ensure that the impacts will not be great on our wildlife, particularly the blue whale. That there have been some issues. Even environmentalists have brought up some of the issues we've been seeing with wind power as a result of that. So, we do need to aggressively shift to renewable energy, but we need to do so in a way that obviously doesn't negatively impact our environment. And lastly, as far as transportation goes, I heard the train whistle just a few minutes ago, but I'd like to hear that train whistle in Groton and in Mystic and going all the way to Stonington as well. We need to extend Shoreline East into those communities to provide connections, obviously, to New Haven, but I'd like to see Shoreline East go as far as T.F. Green Airport in Providence. Electric Boat is now our largest employer, not just in Groton, but in a private sector employer in the state of Connecticut. That is huge. Obviously, their Electric Boat also has a footprint in Rhode Island at Quonset Point, and so that our train line, Amtrak train line, goes right through South Kingston, and so there's no reason why we cannot work with our neighboring state, Rhode Island, to establish a more bona fide commuter rail program along that corridor where there currently is no commuter rail outside of your regional Amtrak service. So I also previously served on the Transportation Committee and have great relationships with our DOT, and so hope to work on those issues. Just on the council, I fought and passed a complete streets ordinance that will protect pedestrian and bicycle safety here in our community, prioritizes their safety, worked hand in hand with some passionate volunteers who are really experts in this field. And as a result, we'll be seeing more sidewalks and bicycle facilities and lanes within our community. And so, when I go door to door, I spend a lot of time walking our streets, and I hear this time and time again how much our community members want walkable communities, places they can, walk to wherever they, live, work, and play. They can walk to those places in a safe and efficient manner. And so I am so committed on climate action. I plan to be obviously an outspoken voice on these issues. We could probably speak for at least 2 or 3 hours about this one subject, but I fundamentally believe it's the issue of my lifetime, and I'm ready to roll up my sleeves, work with our partners, our Groton conservation advocates, and certainly utilize the advocacy and resources and brain power that exists up in Hartford. Our candidacy was endorsed by the Connecticut League of Conservation Voters, the Sierra Club, and the Connecticut Sunrise Movement. So I think that just those endorsements right there indicate that we will be fighters on climate action, and again, can't wait to roll up our sleeves and get that work done.
Okay, thank you. All right, next question. Do you think the 2020 election was conducted fairly and Joe Biden won? And as a follow-up to that, do you support early voting and voting by mail initiatives?
Yes. Joe Biden is our president. He won. Obviously, the U.S. Congress certified the elections, and I am very pleased with the work he's done over the last few years since becoming president. I had the privilege of serving as a delegate for his convention, DNC convention back in 2020, although it was remote. Was obviously very pleased and excited with his election because of the fact that we have an all-Democratic Congress and a Democratic president. We've been able to bring resources back to Groton, ARPA. Through ARPA funds, we are investing those funds in our infrastructure and our parks, and we've had a significant amount of resources as a result of his leadership. And so I'm proud that he is our president, and I do believe that it is advantageous to our communities, Groton and Stonington, if we continue to have this representation, the Democratic representation after November. Obviously, by re-electing our Senator Dick Blumenthal and our Congressman Joe Courtney, who are advocates for our region, brought jobs back to our region, with obviously the significant expansion we've seen at Electric Boat, fighting for prescription drugs, reducing prescription drug prices, fighting for our seniors and our veterans. I can go on and on about them, but we need them in their positions. We need to continue partnering with them, and I'm so honored and pleased to also have their support for my election as well. As far as early voting goes, I'm very passionate about early voting, expanding voter rights. We need to obviously expand early voting, but also expand the ability for folks to vote via absentee ballot. We saw a huge growth in folks utilizing absentee ballots, voting during the pandemic. So many folks still feel unsafe going into public spaces, wearing masks and what have you. So there is that fear still, and obviously, we shouldn't deter people from participating in our local government, electing our local leaders. And there's just far too many restrictions right now on that. So I support early voting. Again, the devil's in the detail as far as how early folks can vote. That will largely be determined by the legislature. But again, we cannot have that discussion unless voters this November either flip the ballot or ensure that they've checked off all the boxes when they vote, but answer that early voting question. And I highly encourage folks who live in the 41st district to vote yes on early voting. That way, the legislature can begin to work on the specific language as far as how how early voting will be ran.
Okay, thank you. All right, and the next question is a little more specific to your district. So the question is, Electric Vote is projected to see an influx of employees in coming years. What impact do you see that having on Groton and surrounding communities? And what would you do as a legislator to support your district during this time?
Absolutely. So as I mentioned, Electric Boat is our largest private employer here in Connecticut. I'm so honored to have the opportunity to represent Groton at this critical time. I previously served on the Planning and Zoning Commission in the city, where we voted to approve the South Yard Assembly building that will be constructing the Columbia-class submarines over the years to come. It's a significant project. If we just look at the skyline, it's changed so significantly over the last few years because of the growth we've seen at Electric Boat. And we have not seen, really visualized or experienced the number of employees that will be coming into our community in the next few years. And when that happens, then we'll start understanding why we need so many trains coming in and out of Groton to get, move people in and out. And because right now, having been a longtime city resident, we can already feel the pinch as far as parking goes. There is, a lot of folks who park on our local roads. So, I'd like to work with Electric Boat, obviously with our Congressman Joe Courtney, our federal delegation, to really develop a plan that has been, our city has been working on over the last few years, but ensure that there are, we do have a parking garage, for example, that for the Electric Boat employees to park at, because we cannot afford to lose any more homes in the city of Groton because of the parking needs, as have been done in the past. So that's really critical. Obviously working on some of the parking issues, working on multimodal transportation system, improving bus service, for example. I serve on the seat board, and that's something the seat has talked about extensively. What it looks like to get to potentially utilize seat buses to to get Electric Boat employees to and from their homes from EB. And most importantly, we have to ensure that there are spaces and places for young folks to play and enjoy. I'm a young guy, but I must admit, and my fiance, for example, she has settled down in the area, and we're so excited to get married at the end of the year. But there's always the question about, what is there really around here for young people to do? We have a very exciting, nightlife in Mystic, and certainly downtown New London, for example. But there are some folks who prefer not to go out and enjoy the great amenities that we do have. Walking in our open spaces, as my fiance and I do with our pup Lola. Walking at Haley State Farm and Bluff Point, and Barn Island in Stonington, for example. But there needs to, I think, be more, for young people around here. And I'd like to, work with, obviously, some folks in our neck of the woods, and hear from new EB employees and engineers and welders about what they would like to see changed, and obviously work with our town and both towns to bring some exciting amenities to our community. But most importantly, Groton is experiencing the greatest industrialization we've seen since the construction of EB, Pfizer, and the subbase. And so at what point is Groton experiencing overdevelopment? And that's where I think, because we've seen such a significant uptick in industrial activities in Groton, we need to hit the pause button on industrialization in our community. That's why I voted against data centers on the Groton Town Council. That's why I opposed the $1 sale of the Mystic Oral School in Old Mystic. That is why, had I represented Stonington, I would have vocally spoke out against development in Smiler's Wharf in downtown Mystic. Yes, we need more housing. Yes, we need to allow for a mix of housing throughout all of our neighborhoods. However, we cannot afford overdevelopment in our communities to accommodate the housing crunch that we're experiencing because of the large influx of people we're experiencing or having from EB. So yes, we need more housing, but we need to be smart about it. A great resource our communities have of our POCD's Plan of Conservation and Developments in the city of Groton and the town of Groton and the town of Stonington. They lay out a very clear framework that our communities can follow for the years to come as we plan for growth and the need to build more housing in our communities. So, local decision making matters. All neighborhoods matter, and that is really an important function of our campaign, is to illustrate that we can accommodate growth by supporting several key policies, but we need to do so in a way that is respectful of our communities. Just as I've done on our Planning and Zoning Commission with respect to the growth we've seen at EB, and just as I've done on the Town Council in some very key votes. So we'll bring that leadership up to Hartford, and again, very excited about our region and the growth that we'll be experiencing for the years to come.
So I'd like to give you the opportunity to respond to a comment from another candidate, Robert Boris, who said as part of his answer for the question on affordable housing that, quote, "My opponent Aundre was the state rep for this area while Branford Manor still had the mold issue for decades. And I don't question the fact that he cares about the members of our community as I do, but he didn't take any action to hold HUD accountable or to get that situation resolved. We just can't step back on these issues or let down our most vulnerable in our community. They don't have any other options, and it's not acceptable." So that's kind of where I stand on that.
Absolutely. Well, I would implore my opponent to speak with any resident in Branford Manor as far as my leadership and my actions and my advocacy on behalf of Branford Manor tenants. I grew up in the shadows of Branford Manor and continue to live in the shadows of Branford Manor. My home is right next door, and my condo is right next door to Branford Manor. I grew up playing with kids in Branford Manor. I grew up walking to the park through Branford Manor. I continue to walk my dog through Branford Manor every day. So to hear my opponent again, just continue negative attacks, I think is very disappointing. We both made a commitment that we would run clean campaigns about the issues and honest and factual, in an honest and factual manner. And so that's disappointing to hear, but again, our record speaks for itself. I was the first person on our town council, along with Portia Bordelon, to call for the end of the tax stabilization agreement that the town and city of Groton signed with Related Affordable in 2017. At the time, I was not a state representative when they signed that tax stabilization agreement. However, it needs to, the town must eliminate it, and as a town councilor, I would vote to hold Related in default. I just want to mention something about Related. The owner of Related owns the Miami Dolphins, is the largest landlord in the city of New York. So this company has the resources to make billions, even if we were to eliminate this tax stabilization agreement. And I think it's a stain on, our on our community if we continue to allow these issues to go unabated. It's inexcusable, and it's quite frankly criminal, given the fact that Related has known about these issues for so long and have done nothing, have raised rents on tenants, have allowed children and seniors to live in mold-infested buildings for years. I have always called for action. Ultimately, it is up to the town and the city. The building official, they review any discrepancies within the home as far as building code violations. So I'm not the mayor of the city of Groton. I am a member of the town council, therefore I can utilize my bully pulpit to effectuate change. I held and conducted the first tenants union meeting, connected tenants to a tenants union organization so that they can better advocate and represent themselves. In fact, my opponent started showing up to those meetings, as have so many other elected officials, to get to learn their issues. So for my opponent to say that I haven't done anything or advocated for tenants living in Brantford Manor, I'd implore him and certainly any person who is living in the town of Groton to speak with tenants in Groton, and they will tell you how much I have advocated on their behalf, how much I will continue to advocate on their behalf, and I will not stop until all of the issues that they're facing are corrected.